You mentioned onboarding, right? So
Yeah.
how quickly are people getting onboarded? How effectively are they getting onboarded? How activated are certain accounts or users within those accounts? So I think those things and then have an immediate impact on revenue. So if you increase conversion rates, if you increase activation rates, that then has an impact on the growth of the company. So it's not just measuring for the sake of measuring, it's looking at what impacts the growth of the company. And I think that underpins all of this stuff. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Marketplace Growth by Accoil. Today, we've got a question for you. Do you track how customers are using your product, and do you track customer engagement? If the answer is no, we think that you might be missing out on an opportunity for growth or several opportunities for growth. One of the first things that people ask when we say, do you track product engagement? And someone says, yes, we're going to start doing that. They ask, who owns that? And instead of asking that question, what's a better question that teams, companies should be asking?
What actually drives your engagement?
Yeah.
So, do you understand the different levers that actually help to shift the dial on that one?
And let's just go right into that. So what
Mm.
does contribute to customer engagement we're talking SaaS products in particular here. And one of the first things that we were talking about before is making sure that the concept that the product is actually valuable, right? So that's sort of the first check,
Yeah.
make sure that you're building something people need. Also from there, matching expectations. So what do customers expect to get out of it? Are they getting that? If not, how do you go about improving that? Usability, onboarding, integrations, what are you able to do with that product? So setting up those things that contribute to engagement to start with.
I think what you're saying is absolutely right, but I think it's probably also helpful to think about those in more detail. So, if we list out all the things that we think drives engagement, you've got to ask yourself, how well am I doing these? So, do you have your concept right? Have you identified your product points? Are your customers communicating to you that they see value? Do you understand the bits of your product that's working really well, the bits that aren't working so well? Are you giving them a place where you actually allow them to work in their normal workflow, or you actually created a product that's quite disruptive to their workflow? Because the name of the game is let them work in the places where they're interested in. So these are all of the things that I would be thinking about, Pete. And I think if we go through some of the other, even things like your onboarding, you may have misunderstood. People are missing important concepts and not onboarding. The number of tools I've onboarded, when I've ended up not using the tool hardly at all, 20%. And no one's reached out to me, or if they have, I've got those really annoying prompts that you're always trying to clear. So, this is about just thinking more strategically on this stuff.
Maybe we'll take a step back and say why, right? So
Yep.
like, why is this important? And
Yep.
said it before, there's opportunities for growth in this. So just to simplify it, we're talking about, you mentioned onboarding, right? So
Yep.
how quickly are people getting onboarded? How effectively are they getting onboarded? How activated are certain accounts or users within those accounts? So I think those things and then have an immediate impact on revenue. So if you increase conversion rates, if you increase activation rates, that then has an impact on the growth of the company. So it's not just measuring for the sake of measuring, it's looking at what impacts the growth of the company. And I think that underpins all of this stuff.
It does. And you've also got things like your social connections, how connected are they feeling to your product? Now, some products, if they solve a bigger pain point, of course, that will have a much more deeper connection. But I also think things like even just the basic stuff like trust, I think that's pretty fundamental to building engagement. If there's no trust, they aren't going to engage with you. So, it all sounds nice at the theory level. I think where it comes down, all of you know your business the most. And so, can you categorically give yourself almost like a rating on all those factors we've mentioned? Can you actually still? Yeah, I think we're doing quite well on that. And if you don't know the answer, go and talk to some customers and start actually thinking about these things. Because if you just try and think about it too theoretically, you're going to get nowhere with this. It's all your tactical stuff, what your customers are saying. Would you agree with that, Pete? You probably have some thoughts on that.
Well, I think I want to dig into when you say tactical stuff and
Mhm.
define that. Like what are some examples of tactical things that you're talking about?
Well, for example, let's just go back to the fundamental one of onboarding. To me, onboarding is you having a very good understanding of what are the key steps that your trialers or your customers have to go through so that they go, oh, I understand how this tool works. This tool is actually going to help me with my problem, or it's going to make my work easier. So I'm actually happy to use this product. So my question to you, very, very fundamental, is do you actually understand what your customers are doing in that process? And
Mhm.
if you're not, then you need to find out. And it's not just the she'll be right. It's actually methodically thinking about, have I got the right steps to find? Now, do I understand my ideal customers? Have I got them and their understanding of what their needs are? And do I understand what's happening in my product?
I actually recently did this with our own product, and it sort of, we haven't really let customers in yet. So I went and just sat through it myself and kind of onboarded myself, gave myself a scenario. I'm a PMM at a mid-sized company. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish here. And just took myself through the process. PL Geek has this friction mapping process. And so I just thought I'll sit down and do the same thing. But what it really made me reflect on is, step by step here, is this where I should be? Am I getting closer to the goal that I've set for myself here, the outcome that I'm looking for? So I think it is still possible to get yourself to that point on your own. If you have customers to talk to, all the better, and even better, someone to look over their shoulder and understand what that looks like. But now we're getting into the real details of
Yeah.
activation and onboarding. I think for today, what we're trying to convey here is how to think about this. Then you can get into the details of how you're going to go about improving that engagement
Yeah.
and tying that back to that revenue, as I said.
We like to say this, don't we? We always like to say, understand what you're trying to achieve, diagnose, give yourself a score and then treat.
Yeah, that's right.
That's basically it. So we've worked out what we think drives our customer engagement and how we're going to really get in the driver's seat and drive our customer engagement.
Okay.
So one, you got to measure it. Two, you got to do a KPI. Three, it's everyone. It's not a silo. And four, it is a continuous pursuit, lifelong pursuit.
Yep.
As long as your product's there, that's what you're interested in.
We've talked about sort of why this is important. Now the question is, how do you actually do this? And Kate, we've got four things that we think everyone can be thinking about. Something that we practice here is, starting from understanding that this is something that we want to do, measure what's happening, right? So understanding exactly what's happening as far as engagement is concerned, and then also understanding what levers you have to pull in order to improve things. Next up, we have it as treat them as KPIs. So understand what you're measuring, and then pick the ones that actually indicate growth in the right direction. Beyond that, we were just talking about off camera here, make sure that everyone knows their part. Who's involved and what does that mean? Because at the top of the video here, we say, the wrong question is who owns engagement. And what we're saying now is it's a team sport. So what's the nuance? What's the difference there?
Well, the unified approach is it's understanding the dynamic. So, we were just thinking about all those different areas, product onboarding, social connections, trust, etc. You can't say sales is revenue. You can't say marketing is leads. Well, you can say it. A lot of people say that, and you'll get only so far. So it basically is everybody has to understand the part they're playing in engagement.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how would you approach this then? Saying that, the wrong question is asking who owns engagement. It's a team sport, but who would, in your mind, be ultimately responsible for sort of driving this forward? I have my opinions, but I'm curious what yours are.
Well, for me, I will always say the leadership team has to constantly be thinking and talking. Leadership sets culture, customer-centric, making the time to talk to customers. It sends very strong signals that you are a customer-centric business. And so for me, it's that measure and everyone understands the score and saying what role, if that score is going down because we're getting feedback, for example, that people are having trouble at a particular point in the product, that's then on product and engineering to start to think about how they would solve to that. for
Mm.
example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. It's a top-down thing. So somebody has to own it,
Yep.
in my opinion. Like there's someone, the buck stops with me, so to speak. But as far as pulling those individual levers, I think it is a team sport. But yeah, I
Yep.
still think it's important to have someone that's sort of driving it. This is ongoing. This is continuous learning. It's a lifelong pursuit, lifelong in terms of your product. How do you just thinking about getting better all the time? So it's not one and done. It's step by step making it better. What does that look like in your mind? I mean, in in my thinking, it's that sort of like 1% better every day kind of approach where we're not trying to fix everything all at once, but it's just compounding improvements.
Yeah. So I think it's also dependent on what your metrics are doing. So
Mm,
if you're trending in the right direction, then clearly some of the practices and the things that you're doing is working. Keep doing. And if you really identify your sweet spot, even do more of that. I think it's more about being careful when things start to flatten and things start to trend down because that's complacency. But again, it's stepping back and looking at it over time. It's not just reacting day to day. And for me, and because I know at Accoil Analytics, we're very much about accounts and users and thinking, the sum of the parts make the whole, I think you actually need to build your capability even if you're doing that manually, with just event counting, etc. For example, when you're measuring and monitoring. But again,
yeah.
I probably digress, but that's probably what I would be thinking about.
So one of the things that I've always been a big fan of, and I've gotten pushback on this over the years, but is simple exercise like stop, start, continue. What's something that we should stop doing? Experiments that we can start, and then to you said before, like what's working. I think that's a question that doesn't get asked enough when it comes
Yeah.
to any part of a business, but in particular, I think it's really valuable when it comes to engagement here is what has been working. Can we double down on that and keep going?
Yeah. And I know at
My approach.
Atlassian, I really liked the concept of crawl, walk, run. So when you're actually diagnosing, you kind of give yourself, where are we at with it? And so I used to love the way we'd do our little chart and we'd go, well, we're crawling at this stage. If we can get to this, a walk to us looks like this in 6 months, 12 months. And, we'll be flying in 2 years. So I kind of really like to overlay that with what you were saying too, Pete. So I kind of, quite a simple girl, really. Pete is how I would describe myself. But it's just methodically and systematically working this through and not giving up, not giving up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm a fan of simple frameworks. Anything too complicated doesn't get done. So, you know, crawl, walk, run, start, stop, continue. To me, pretty simple questions that pretty much anyone can jump in and answer. All right, I'm
Yep.
going to wrap us up here and just do a quick recap to make sure that we really drive home what we're talking about here. It's understanding customer engagement. If it becomes and when it becomes a priority at your company, what are you measuring? How are you measuring it? What are the important metrics that you're trying to measure here? Who is involved? So who's on the team that's going to help drive it? And then how do you instill this as something that's just continuous improvement within the company to help grow the bottom line, really? I mean, if it all comes back to revenue, I think that's just being honest here. So that's the way that we're thinking about it, how you implement that. All right. For more information on how to actually measure your product engagement, we will be releasing more videos on that in the near future. So stick around, subscribe to the channel, and give us a like if you found this helpful. Otherwise, Kate, anything that you want to send us off with?
Nope. Otherwise, more sales to you people. And I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.